Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. It's the Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 8th of April 2024. Sorry I'm a little bit late to it, life gets in the way sometimes. Just to give you a reminder, I have the second part to my 10 days in Ukraine kind of quasi-documentary. I'm just me on my own stitching these things together. It is what it is, but thank you for the kind feedback. I put that out to members first, and I had to change the last credit. It said to be continued in part 2 still, so I changed that to part 3. So part 2 is out, but all the members' comments of obviously not going to be on this one. Just thank you very much to the members who gave their lovely feedback to that. That is now available for general viewing for everyone, so please check it out. Right, we'll go to the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find them in the description to the video below. You can see that 890 personnel losses, a pretty high number. That's up at the higher end of the range that we've seen recently. We don't often go over 1,000 at the moment. That was sort of a couple of months back when the Russians were really pushing in the Avdiivka area, taking some pretty heavy personnel casualties. They are now taking predominantly, well, they are still taking very heavy casualties, of course. 890 is a large number. And as I say, the upper end of the recent range. But it's mainly equipment that they are losing at the moment, and they're losing it hand over fist. Here we have 13 tanks being lost, 24 armoured personnel vehicles, and 40 pieces of artillery, 3 multiple launch rocket systems, 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems. That is, again, it's not maybe not the highest numbers in those categories, but just consistently problematic for the Russians. 39 vehicles and fuel tanks and 3 pieces of special equipment means that they are losing a lot of stuff, and they are doing that irrespective of the lack of equipment coming from the US. So 6 months without a significant aid package. They've given the odd smaller presidential drawdown authority and so on, those smaller sort of $200 million packages, but not the 60 odd billion dollars that they've been waiting for 6 months. And still the Ukrainians are able to exact these kinds of tolls on the Russians on a daily basis. So imagine what would have happened and could have happened had they had that aid package sooner. That's assuming they are actually going to get it at all. Now, there are still these conversations going on about what was destroyed in the attacks on 3 air bases. I don't know, was it 3 or 4 nights ago now? There's a report coming out that drones destroyed 7 warplanes in Yeysk airfield. So this is one of the main attacks was at Morozovsk, and that's where the claim was 6 airplanes destroyed, 8 damaged, and 20 odd people killed. The satellite imagery doesn't support those claims that came from the GUR and the 25th Airborne Aviation Unit. So I don't know what to think about what happened at Morozovsk. Who knows? And then there was a claim of, well, at the time I was thinking I only saw 1 drone getting through to Engels 2 Air Base in Saratov, but there were probably more drones hitting there. There was a claim yesterday that definitely one of the larger bombers was damaged, possibly, another. There could have been sort of 3 airplanes, larger airplanes, taken out there or not. And now there are claims that there are quite some significant losses at Yeysk, where there was, again, I was thinking there was only 1 or 2 drones hitting there, but maybe not. Anyway, April 5th attack was part of a broader Ukrainian drone assault that day that also targeted those other 2 air bases previously mentioned. So take that with a huge pinch of salt. We do not have confirmation really of any. There's slight confirmation. Sujamimus did a video on I think it might have been the Engels 2 airbase strike, and evidence of scorch marks in the damaged plane there. So go and check his video output out to get the latest on that. There's no Andrew Perpetua lost stats today. His one yesterday that was really extensive had him saying when he released that there was a video with 10 pieces of Russian equipment that he hadn't had time to check yet. So it could be another sizable list coming out when it does come out, but I never miss them out. I always show them to you at some point. Just to let you know, I mean, there's a range of other videos that I'm going to show you that hopefully make some kind of statement, have some kind of point. They're not just stuff getting blown up. I'm only referencing this one because it's one of those bizarre Franken-Sam sort of vehicles, which is, there it is, one of those anti-submarine rocket launchers on the back of a truck that was taken out by an FPV drone. And what's important with this one is its thermal imagery. It's nighttime, night vision hit on that RBU 6000. So that's, again, useful that the Ukrainians are able to do that, and they are able, it seems, to do that at a rate that's sort of 5-to-1 Ukrainian night vision drone hits compared to Russians, and that's a complete switch, as I said yesterday, of the previous statistic. So yeah, really good news there. There was this big hit with the Gimlers, a HIMARS strike it seems, or similar, in Kherson at a gas station, petrol station, where I believe there are some claims that electronic warfare equipment was there. I don't know. Some saying here a group of Russian vehicles at that station at Veliki Kupani. I met someone from Veliki Kupani. He said it's a shame. It used to be, I think it was there that was like the biggest. It's probably could be in that picture, biggest fruit and veg market in the whole. Possibly even in Ukraine or something it was, and then it's now, when you go to the website, everything's in Russian prices, not Ukrainian. It's all quite sad. Anyway, so that was hit with a HIMARS. Looks fairly significant, quite a bit of damage done there. That's the aftermath, and that's as it was hit. And then what else do we have? Ukrainian border guards. So much of this footage coming out at the moment, you can see it just rendering there where they are being hit with cluster munitions. Ukrainian border guards repelling a Russian assault in Bakhmut area. An enemy armoured group of 23 Russians, supported by a tank and 4 armoured personnel carriers, attempted to storm the positions of the Ukrainian Defence Forces. However, the occupiers were defeated and retreated. The reason I'm referencing this, and you can see all these videos, they are linked in the description below. Yes, it's a bunch of stuff getting blown up and an attack getting repelled, but it's the use of a range of artillery ammunition here that goes towards this idea that the Ukrainians are starting to use artillery ammunition much more freely. And we are seeing not firsthand, we're seeing video evidence of this repeatedly at the moment. So I think things have changed. Indeed, as I said on my frontline update yesterday, Randy Mott here saying artillery fire seems to have picked up for the AFU. Artillery normally accounts for 70 to 75% of casualties. The Ukrainians have used drones to pick up some slack as ammunition has run low, but it appears that they are getting back on track with the Czech initiative, for example. Recent videos of thwarted Russian attacks give you a good idea of the devastating role artillery can play if available and accurately handled. Exactly what I was just showing you then, and this is supported by the data. This is coming from the Tracking Russia's Losses in Ukraine site, and it looks like Ukrainian artillery strikes are back up to the kind of the average since November the 1st. It is an up and down picture, but we have had troughs that have been particularly low of late, and that is no more evident than in the stats for around end of March. There you can see right down to the lowest since November the 1st. But this is all at a period when, actually not all of it. So if you take from sort of this time, from here, the Ukrainian aid from US didn't come. So they're expecting that big package back in October, and it didn't come. And although there are a couple of spikes where probably they're getting ammunition from somewhere, it's a general downward trend, up here and then down again. I wanted to know, as I said yesterday, what was responsible for the end of February spike that meant that the Ukrainians suddenly had a bit of ammunition, but then it fell down to really low levels, and now they seem to be back up to average firing rates, although those rates themselves are not high enough. Really you want the Ukrainians to be firing up at this kind of rate. The Russians are there are claims that they're at 10,000, maybe more now, which is a quarter to a sixth of what they were. So at the beginning of the war, there are claims that they were firing between 40 and 60,000 rounds a day, whereas the Ukrainians have never had that level of artillery usage. I think there was one stage in the counteroffensive where the Ukrainians overtook the Russians as they started hammering the Russian artillery, and that was really significant. But now the Russians have, again, the advantage. The question is to what extent. Some people have been claiming recently 6-1 advantage is what they have, and that's why the Ukrainians desperately need that ammunition provision to come through. Interesting here that a nearly full intact Russian Lancet drone was down by electronic warfare, and obviously they can then take that part. That's a Magyar there. They can take that part and really look at how it works. They are replicating the Lancet. I don't know whether it's worth replicating the wing structure of this, because there are some who claim, Andrew Perpetuus talked about this, how it makes it very difficult to control, and it's possibly why a number of Lancets miss. They seem to miss quite a bit because there's this kind of drift on them. The yaw and whatnot. Anyway, they're quite difficult to control as they come into their terminal phase, I think, and that's part of their design. Then in slightly different, I don't know what's gone on here. It could just be an accident, but what's interesting is this is a second icebreaker that has caught fire recently. This one's in Vladivostok, which is right on the eastern seaboard. Then there was one on the northern seaboard that was on fire. I think it was in St. Petersburg recently as well. Russia's ice-class ship Katerina Velikaya reportedly caught fire, leaving 1 dead and 3 injured. Russia's unique ice navigation vessel caught fire while it was under repair at the shipyard at Dalzavod in Vladivostok. Primorski Krai, Russia's Far Eastern Prosecutor's Office, claimed yesterday. Law enforcement officials are currently conducting the inspections and trying to determine the circumstances of the incident, the prosecutor's office said. Katerina Velikaya, built in 2020, is an Icebreaker 7 class vessel that can operate in the conditions of the Arctic Circle and can travel through ice thickness of up to 2.5 meters. So a fairly capable and new vessel being repaired caught fire, causing quite a bit of an issue there. Now, talking about Russia on fire, and I don't know if this is careless smoker or a strike or partisans, but there's a big fire. It appears in the Krasnodar region, which is the area to the east of sort of Kerch Bridge, sort of that part of Russia there. Russia claims it's just a shoemaking factory, and warehouses are on fire in the village of Industrialny. Tim White says he's not entirely convinced, and other people talking about this. There's quite a bit of footage about this. Russian Telegram channels claim that 2 hangars in the village, interesting that hangars would be used to make shoes. Anyway, in the village of Industrialny, Krasnodar Krai were on fire and engulfed 1,700 square meters. Fire reportedly occurred at the Rozpromtorg shoe factory. And then, lots of imagery of that fire there. Moving on to distant strikes, we have 17 of 24 drones being taken out. So that's still 7 drones reaching their target, one presumes, which is not great. And they managed to stop 1 KH-59 missile. I don't know how many were sent. Drones were destroyed in Khmelnytsky, Kirovrad, Mykolaiv, Zhytomyr, Dnipropetrovsk and Kiev regions. Zhytomyr took a bit of a beating yesterday. As you can see, a number of these places were targeted. Odessa suffered a hit during the night. It seems that the bridge near the city may have been damaged by one of Russia's drones. Ukrainian officials confirm a logistics and transport object was targeted, and due to falling debris, a gas station was also damaged. And then we have the claim that Russian attacks against Ukraine killed at least 4 people and injured at least 9 over the last 24 hours. Russian kamikaze drones attacked the critical infrastructure facility in Zhytomyr Oblast, as I was saying. The regional military administration said. Zviahel City Council reported a direct threat of air pollution as a result of the damage, urging residents to stay indoors and close their windows. No casualties were reported. So who knows? Quite often when things get hit, they are either very kind of generic claims to like critical infrastructure. What can that mean? And sometimes very often the Ukrainians, due to operational security, are very cryptic or don't say at all what was hit. So my guess is that some fairly important things were probably hit last night. Russian forces used freshly made missiles for large-scale attacks on Ukraine in March, according to Andriy Cherniak, spokesperson for Ukraine's military intelligence, speaking to the Financial Times. He estimated that Moscow has enough missiles to carry out one or two more big attacks in the coming weeks. Quote, we expected the attacks at the beginning of the winter, but now we see that the missiles they have used are freshly made. So this talks to the idea that they are firing them at the rate they're producing them. They just have no stockpiles left. They are using what they're making. Ukrainian officials said the damage to energy infrastructure caused by Russia is worse than in the winter of 2022 to 23, although it's more localized, according to newspapers. So this is interesting. This is what I've talked about a lot recently. And actually, there's some more details coming out about this. So one of the things is that Russia has access to Chinese intelligence and satellite imagery, which means that their attacks are going to be much more accurate and they are much better able to hit time-sensitive targets. So that is a significant closing of the gap between the two sides there. Ukraine has traditionally had the advantage in that kind of intelligence, which has mean that translates into much greater success in both striking Russian targets from a distance and doing general warfare on the front lines. That is a big problem for the Ukrainians going forward, and we're going to look at that a little bit more in the next video with regard to threats on China from the US. But I also think that the Russians have adapted. They've got maybe better missiles. They're using different, they're using ballistic missiles and hypersonic missiles that are more precise, and they're targeting things better, and they are being more efficient with their attacks. And I think that where a couple of years ago, there were these massive missile attacks that just pretty much going anywhere and everywhere, that they had limited effect on, say, the energy infrastructure. Now, with better intelligence, better missile usage, and just, it seems like a much more sensible strategy, the Russians are doing more with less. And we're probably seeing fewer missiles ramming into civilian infrastructure like apartment buildings, and we're seeing them hit much more meaningful targets in terms of a military strategy. Military sources in Kyiv claim that Russia has decided to make Kharkiv a grey zone unsuitable for civilian habitation. So, although I've just said what I've said, the difference, although they are hitting key infrastructure in Kharkiv, like the energy infrastructure, the power plants, they're also just throwing drones and ballistic missiles into Kharkiv, and they've been doing that for a long time, but they seem to be upping the frequency there. And I have a feeling, a bit like Kherson, it's like, well, if we can't have it, you can't have it either. So I don't think this is part of we're going to take Kharkiv. It's a case of we're going to destroy it. We're going to knock down your second biggest city, and this site of, it's a university town or city with a lot of culture associated with it, a lot of cultural heritage in the buildings and the sites there. And they are, I think the Russians are just going to reduce it to rubble. That would be their intention, and it might take a long time, but they're just going to continue doing that. There's no other sense to what they're doing otherwise, which is just hammering civilians and making their lives hell in what is systematic terrorism. So the mayor claims that it's worse than at the start of the war, when all but 300,000 of the pre-war population of 2 million fled. I think there's about 1.3 million there now, but I would imagine there's going to be a lot of people leaving Kharkiv again due to what Russia is doing. To the point that Zelensky's made a direct plea for help to protect Kharkiv from an air assault. So he said the situation there is very harsh. Russian terror is constant. Russians began using guided aerial bombs against the city almost daily. So that's the other thing I forgot to mention just now that I told you previously, that they're using these guided glide bombs, the card bombs, to hammer the city. We are looking for ways to increase Kharkiv's ability to protect the sky. This is a task for both the military and diplomats who are in charge of international communication and must maintain daily dialogue with partners. Ukraine clearly lacks sufficient air defense systems, and this is evident to all of our partners. The world must finally feel the pain caused by Russian terrorists in Kharkiv, Kupiansk, Donetsk regional towns, Zaporizhia, Sumy region, and many other Ukrainian communities. There are air defense systems around the world that can help. Only political will is required to transfer them to Ukraine. Now, I was wondering about just lending equipment to Ukraine. I don't know if this is happening, but for me, I'd be thinking, right, what are the chances of the UK really being attacked by, say, London being attacked by foreign missiles. Well, we are moving towards, I guess, a nuclear, the threat of a nuclear war. I'm not saying we're moving towards a nuclear war, but I guess the people are a little bit cautious about that. But there could be this case for saying, right, okay, we're not expecting imminent strikes with ballistic missiles on our cities. So here are some Patriot missile systems that we're going to loan you, and after a couple of years, we'll have them back. Thank you very much. You can use them, and then if they get destroyed, then you can pay for them, type thing. Rather than here's some Patriot missile systems. There you go. Good luck with them. You can have them, and we'll buy some new ones. It's like we'll loan these to you for 6 months, a year. See how you get on, but we will have them back, type scenario. He says, I'm grateful, Zelensky, to the countries who have already helped. Being active in completing this task is a personal responsibility of our diplomats who work in those areas and with countries that have the necessary systems. Patriots must now be in Ukraine, so there will be no need to use them on NATO's entire eastern flank in the future. So this is actually a really good point. Just as I was saying, in the same kind of maybe a lone way, but you've got all these Patriots on the eastern flank of NATO, where you have actually some Patriots from one country in another country, as you've got NATO protecting their border area. Well, actually just move that border area further to the east so that you're moving those Patriots into Ukraine to help Ukraine. I think that's a pretty sound reasoning. There's one reason for this, says Ukraine Battle Map. It's because Ukraine only has 3 Patriot systems, including protecting Kyiv and one other location. The rest of Ukraine is less protected than Kyiv and can be hit by Iskander-M and Kinzhal missiles because they have 0 defenses against those missiles. This is, again, same topic. Next, the reporting Financial Times reporting that Russia has changed its approach to strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Instead of massive strikes, as it was in 2022 to 23, Moscow is using $100 million precision missiles to attack facilities in regions less protected than Kyiv. They are easier to destroy completely. The damage caused is more serious than in the winter of 2022 to 3. Some facilities will not be restored by the next winter. Blackouts were avoided thanks to warm weather, energy imports from the EU, and increased generation from alternative sources previously. But going forward, I think Russia's had much greater success in hammering Ukraine's critical infrastructure this time round. And then here we see, I find this pretty fascinating. So this is a UK-provided jet-propelled drone active in Belgorod. Right, so that's super significant for a couple of reasons. And there was one that was actually found on the ground as well that maybe, I don't know how it came out of the sky. Anyway, the relevance to that is that these are jet-powered... Okay, earlier today, Ukrainian forces mounted an attack into Russia's Belgorod Oblast utilizing jet-powered OWA drones. These drones, effectively low-cost cruise missiles, present a serious new challenge to Russia's air defenses. So that's what it looks like. The models used to resemble a pair of earlier downed drones, likely a new novel design. But there are claims that these are British jet-powered drones. And if so, that is Western weapons being used to strike Russian targets within Russia. So if this is the case, this is actually a pushing of the envelope. This is getting to those red lines and dipping the toe over those red lines. And they are, it must be said, red lines that the West had set themselves on themselves. These aren't Russian red lines. We constrain ourselves. This is why Macron's rhetoric is so refreshing at the moment and on point. We shouldn't be setting ourselves these red lines. Russia are laughing all the way back to the Kremlin with that. So we say, oh, you can't use Western weapons inside Russia. Well, actually, if this is a British cruise missile knockoff, it's not a cruise missile, but a jet-propelled drone, then Ukraine are doing that, and that opens the door for further usage. So if they're doing that, can we then see Storm Shadow missiles that the UK provided and produced missiles be used to strike within Russia if they're using British drones that are functionally similar? I don't know. Of course, a lot depends on whether that is the UK drone that many suspect it might be. And then Kursk last night, which is a Russian oblast, the governor there saying that Ukraine reportedly hit the territory of a former distillery near the village of Gueva in the Sujan district overnight with drones. So some target being hit there, possibly in Kursk, causing some issues for the Russians. Right, moving on to other bits and pieces. We're going to start with some ISW analysis here. Russia is ramping up offensive operations despite increasing losses. So this is interesting as one, it confirms, well, at least the ISW are also evaluating that the Russians are losing huge amounts of equipment and personnel. So they're saying, right, they're taking increasing losses, the Russians, and yet, even given that, they seem to be ramping up offensive operations. I've been talking about how they've been sort of culminating and things are fairly stable apart from in a couple of hot points. My views are they keep pushing those hot points and grinding on. So Chaziv Yar, Novomykhailivka, I think are two particular areas where the Russians will continue making advances, but they'll be taking huge losses in so doing. And that works in the long game in Ukraine's favour. Russian forces continue to ramp up their offensive operations along the front line despite the material and personnel losses, say the ISW. And I would agree with that, but I don't know how widespread their offensives can be, or whether they'll only be able to concentrate in a couple of small areas. German Aid to Ukraine talks about an article that Budanov was interviewed in, gave German ARD an exclusive interview, and he summarised it usefully here, so thanks German Aid. It says, one, personally he thinks, so this is the intelligence chief of Ukraine, a Ukrainian offensive this year is possible. 2, everyone is working on the topic of destroying the Crimean Bridge. Let's see if it still stands at the end of the year, he said, cryptically. Or not so cryptically, I guess. 3, it is questionable how effective tourists would be on the Crimean Bridge, but it would, of course, make life easier. 4, the EU can replace the no longer forthcoming military aid from the US. Interesting. I don't know how realistic that is. I think, in principle, the EU can replace the US. I mean, it's not conceptually impossible, right? It just takes political will and a bunch of money. So if the political will is there and the money is forthcoming, then the EU can replace what the US is giving and can give. However, it will take time. So the point about how important the US are is that they've got absolute bucket loads of stockpiles sitting in warehouses. They've got thousands of tanks and thousands of infantry fighting vehicles to the scale that no other country comes close in terms of allies of Ukraine. And so when it comes to giving instant assistance to Ukraine, the US is best placed. EU can do it. It might take 5 years though. That's the thing. And it would need consistent political support, which is where the EU is suffering going forward because the Russians are undermining European unity with their fomenting of disunity and discord in the political landscape in Europe. 5 most important military aid currently are artillery systems and ammunition, especially for artillery. Of course, we knew that. 6, after the Czech initiative, there is right now no additional ammunition available at the front. So right now, no improvement in the supply of ammunition. I'm not sure that's true, as I've talked about already in this video. I think there is, and there's anecdotal evidence of that from like us looking at video evidence. There's statistical evidence, it appears, of that, and there are also anecdotal claims of people of artillery units on the front line not complaining as much about ammunition shortages. So I don't know if that's a bit of disinformation to try and get people to, because they still need, like, even given the Czech initiative, that is not fully secured in terms of the money. So the pledges are there, but the actual money isn't for all of it. B, there's the Estonian discovery of more ammunition that needs funding if we want that to get there. And C, that is still just an amount at a point in time, and we need to make sure that there is sustainable forthcoming ammunition procurement for Ukraine. And so him saying, yeah, we're still in trouble is worthwhile to try and get all of those things in place. Anyway, 7. He is sure that no Ukrainian official had anything to do with the blowing up of the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines, and no such orders were given to any authorities. I guess he would say that, but interesting. 8. He supports the Pope's proposal to exchange all of Ukraine's and Russia's POWs immediately. It is only work to convince Russia. So this is the idea from the Pope that they should just have a complete swap of all their prisoners and then almost kind of start again. And Bunov supports that, but Russia they are the people that need convincing. 9, at one point, almost all POWs were close to being exchanged. Didn't happen, and Russia is currently not interested in doing so. 10, Turkey is no longer playing a more active role in the exchange of POWs. The main role is now played by Ukraine, together with our friends of the UAE. Interesting, the United Arab Emirates are the main player there. 11, prediction. Russia will move somewhere closer to Chasiv Yar and move towards the city of Pokrovsk. So that's in the Avdiivka direction. So as they're moving west through the Avdiivka sector, they are moving towards a larger city behind called Pokrovsk. But nothing will change dramatically. I broadly agree with that. I think Chasiv Yar might fall, but I don't think that would necessarily lead to some massive territory loss for the Ukrainians. And finally, 12, nothing will happen in the next 2 months. Actions will start at the end of May or the beginning of June. Interesting. So I'm fascinated to get a sense from someone like him. Obviously, we'll never truly get that idea. He'll only let on what's publicly useful. Only let on publicly what is useful for him to let on. But I would love to know what they think about the Russian capability to commit to a large offensive in the summer. Now, there are some claiming that we should expect a large Russian offensive, and others have claimed that they won't be in a position really to do that. I'm with the latter. I would be really surprised if the Russians are in a position to be able to do a massive offensive. And the only way I can see that happening is them throwing the kitchen sink at the front line to completely exhaust themselves, and doing that because they know that the Ukrainians aren't in a good position. So it's like, well, the Ukrainians are down here, we're also down here, but now's better time to do it, because if they start getting up here and we start getting up here, it becomes even more, it will become too difficult to really get to the point where you're down here and you have a sort of breakthrough. So I think, like, if we have nothing and they have nothing, it's a better time to attack than waiting like a year till we have lots and they have lots. Is kind of my thinking there, but it's completely speculative. I may be wrong. Right. Anti-Kremlin militia says hot phase of recent incursions into Russia is over. So these are the Russian Volunteer Corps and the other lot, who are, some of them are a little bit nefarious, particularly I think it's a Russian Volunteer Corps, isn't it? More so than the Siberia Legion and the Freedom Legion of Russia. I think these are the guys that have got some genuine Russian neo-Nazis in there. But it's kind of like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and if you're going to attack into Russia, we'll provide you some guns. Thank you very much. But anyway, the Russian Volunteer Corps announced the completion of the hot phase of its raids into border regions of Russia from Ukraine on April the 7th. Yesterday evening, the sabotage and reconnaissance groups have remained in Russia even after the hot phase of the operation was completed, according to the Russian Volunteer Corps. Now, I think the jury's still out on whether these guys were successful at all. They took more casualties than they exacted on the Russians, certainly in terms of vehicles and equipment. I know some people really want this to have been successful, and so you can try and argue. I mean, we can all try and argue that the positives were this and they overwhelm the negatives. I could argue both ways there, and because I don't know, and I don't know what the metrics of success were, and I don't know really what they were intending, diverting troops seems to be the most plausible. They weren't really going to take and maintain captured territory. So I don't know whether the PR-ness of what they did, or the distraction to the Russians and the moving troops from maybe the Kupiansk area. Maybe Kupiansk has been somewhat stabilized because of activities up in the northern borders. Who knows? And so it could be that these were successful, but it could also be that they weren't successful, and actually they got a bit of a tonking that they weren't quite expecting, or anywhere in between. I'll sit on the fence. I don't know. I'm sure we won't properly find out until sometime later. The commander of the Russian unit, whose order was to shoot the Ukrainian POWs near Krinky. So I referenced a video of 3 POWs who were shot. I've seen the video. It's horrible. And it's yet another video of Russians executing Ukrainian prisoners of war in war crimes. But we live in a modern world where everything is either on social media, or you can do really good investigative journalism, the sort that Bellingcat do, to find out who particular people are who are responsible for X and Y. So Bellingcat done really good jobs in investigating who has been behind particular missile strikes that take place from within Russia to hit buildings in Ukraine. And that's included sort of pilots releasing those cruise missiles onto civilian infrastructure, the units who have ordered that, the commanders who ordered those strikes, and they've put on social media, these are the actual people. So when it comes to the war being over, you possibly The Hague will come knocking at those people's doors for committing war crimes. Anyway, according to evocation.info, this crime was committed by servicemen of the 328th Regiment, 104th Division, on the orders of Serhiy Ishtuganov to intimidate the Ukrainian fighters. Ishtuganov, by the way, was awarded the Medal Hero of Russia. The paratrooper regiment is directly involved in the battles for the Ukrainian bridgehead near Krinky. In addition to the fact that the occupiers destroyed this village, they are involved in a number of war crimes against both civilians and Ukrainian soldiers. I mean, you can go and watch a video. It's horrible. It's people getting murdered who have surrendered, who are prisoners of war and should be protected and have POW rights. Okay, we're moving on to the Russian floods. Now, we have seen in the Orsk region of Russia this basically. So Orenburg area, there is widespread flooding. Look at these thousands of buildings underwater. Incredibly devastating floods as a result of a dam breaking. Well, another one has broken, and it looks like there is going to be further flooding, this time in Chelyabinsk. The financial drain of Putin's global war projects has Russia in a state of collapse as yet another dam bursts, this time in Chelyabinsk, poised to flood the region, says Jay in Kiev, and you can see it there. So, yeah, not good for the Russians in that context. Right, I'm going to just reference you because I think it's an interesting little insight into an artillery unit here. This is Paul. Is it Paul Conroy on the Times radio here? Yeah, Paul Conroy. He's a photojournalist and filmmaker. Now, he's famous for, it's not on BBC iPlayer at the moment, but the brilliant Storyville. I watched it back in, goodness me, when was it? It was last shown in 2021, but I think it was like 5 years ago I saw it. In Homs, so this is Paul Conroy, and this is Marie Colvin. She was a fantastic journalist, and both of these guys were going into Homs, like, as it was being attacked by Russians and Syrians, right? And they were reporting from there. It was phenomenal documentary, Under the Wire. If you can find it anywhere, watch it. It's superb. Really, really powerful. She dies. And it was terribly sad because she was a wonderful journalist. Paul Conroy, who was injured and hasn't really gone back to anywhere with explosions since then. Obviously it's hugely psychologically as well as physically, problematic being involved in war and becoming injured as a result of huge strikes that kill your colleague. Well, he's now in Kherson and he's like got himself over that. And there's a really good interview. So this Putin's weaker war economy can't match troop numbers with equipment from Times Radio that always follow the Ukraine war very closely. It's a really good video. It's got lots of different people on it, splicing together, even operator Starsky's on there, splicing together a load of experts. But the last bit is Paul Conroy, and he is really worth watching. Anyway, we'll dip into this.
Where have you been?
Bit.
Oh, I was just out yesterday. I think it was. I was out with a unit. The artillery unit we were with, they were fantastic. They're just I was artillery as well, so I've got a bit of an affinity with. But we arrived. We had to leave at 2 a.m. under the cover of darkness because of the drones, and they took us.
Where was this?
Where was it?
Where'd you go to? Yeah,
it was just up the river. I can't be too too specific about
Precise,
it,
yeah,
but
I understand, yeah.
somewhere up the river. And everything
Kherson.
takes place at night, and we were taken out by a red torch, and we just went down these muddy steps into this, basically an underground room with 4 guys in it, and they were like, hello, visitors. What are you doing here? But they were just lovely, such lovely guys. But I was saying, like, how long have you been in the artillery? And he said, oh, well, we found a gun. We found a Russian gun. And I was like, what? He said, it had no wheels and there were some bits missing. He said, but before that, we were a mortar unit, but then we found this gun, so we kept it. The Russians had abandoned it. And he said that over a couple of months, they found some wheels for it, and then they found some sights. And I was like, well, how did you learn to fire it? Did you go train? He said, oh, YouTube.
No.
And I just loved it. After, like, you learn to shoot on YouTube, and they're going, yeah, we're actually pretty good shots. But they live this existence. They live underground and deep, about 6-7 foot underground with wooden beams and piles of earth. But they're using ammunition that they went out and scavenged in the woods, ammunition they found that the Russians had left behind. So everywhere you go, you get this sense that the ammunition is running out. You look at the eastern front of Divka up to around Kramatorsk, that area. The Russians are pushing, and we were speaking to one lad yesterday at a reconnaissance unit, and he said they are. He said there's a lot of the Russians are too thick, but he said they are learning, they are adopting. They're copying Ukraine tactics. So it's an ever developing technological war with the drones, which are a complete game changer. But he said their tactics it's a mini arms race out there at the moment, certainly with the drones.
So that's interesting. I thought there's a nice little snippet there. We know that about the drones, about this arms race that's going on, and counter measures, and then counter measures, and so on and so forth. But it's just really interesting to see, because you and I know, probably you spend enough time on YouTube as much as I do. But if anything goes wrong in my house, like my washing machine breaks, I'm the sort of guy that'll be like, I'm going to fix that, and I can fix it. And the reason I can fix it is because all the answers are on bloody YouTube. So I'm like, right, somebody's going to fix this particular washing machine or this particular tumble dryer at some point. I remember changing a belt on my tumble dryer. Like, yeah, YouTube, thank you very much. Job done. And we look on YouTube for everything. Well, who knew that you could learn how to fire a D30 howitzer or whatever on YouTube? And these guys, who are a mortar crew, found an old battered howitzer, and then over time picked up pieces to fix it up, got it into working state, and then now apparently are pretty good at using it. And they learnt their trade not from going to some artillery training establishment, but just on YouTube. I think that's incredible. But that's Paul Conroy, really, really incredible guy, and such a good segment to that particular Times Radio video. Now, completely obviously going to happen here. So after 2 weeks of torture, that included, just look at the eyes of that guy, included cutting off pieces of their bodies. The guys arrested for the Moscow attack, so the Crocus City Hall attack, have changed their tune and are now blaming Ukraine. So this is despite several governments saying ISIS did it, and ISIS saying ISIS did it. Now these guys, with clear evidence of torture, saying, "Oh, you know what? It was Ukraine." Yeah, of course it was, and that comes in line with Medvedev accusing Biden and Macron of involvement in the terrorist attack on Crocus City Hall. Quote, "So the terrorist attack was ordered by ISIS, right? The real employers are the Ukrainian Banderovites, your hatchet men, and the accomplices in this murder are all of you, Biden, Macron, Sunak, Schultz, and other minions. We will not forget this," wrote Dimka Empty Glass Medvedev on social networks. It's so obvious, but of course that's landing with the Russian domestic audience. But what I would like to see back to this is, like, if someone came to me right now, I'm going about my daily life, I'm just going down to one stop to get a pint of oat milk or whatever, right? Like, someone comes up to me and says, "I'm accusing you officially of murder," right? I'll be like, really? I'd be like, hang on, right? I wouldn't just go, all right, that's nice. I'm just going to go back home with this meal. I'm going to make a cup of tea. Just sit down, put my feet up, have a cup of tea. See you later. Thanks for the accusation there. I would be like, right, you're false accusing me of something as massive as that. I'm going to hit you back. Let's take this to court, mate. If you are going to absolutely rubbish my name in public as well, it's like they announce it in the newspaper. This is public stuff. If you're going to rubbish my name in public, we're going to go to town on you, mate. Like, I'm going to go to town on you. I wouldn't let that stand, right? What are we doing when they say stuff like this? What are we doing with the UN? You know, I had that chat with Tulares saying they shouldn't even be in the UN. Like, what are we doing about this? What, are we just sitting back and letting Russia completely rubbish us in public and walk all over us rhetorically while sitting back and not being, I mean, you know, US Congress issue obviously being a particular one there, but you know, what are we doing about this? Oh, it just frustrates me. Meanwhile, you know, the Russians are going about their business of destroying Ukraine. So since the beginning of the full-scale war, the Russians have completely destroyed 60,000 and more hectares of forest in the territories occupied by them, worth 14 billion hryvnias, according to NGL media investigation. These damages do not take into account the environmental consequences, the elimination of which can be much more expensive. So just look at these images right there, the green trees of that forest, and then look at that. Those are forest areas that have been hammered by artillery that have just basically, they're now tree trunks stuck up in the air. This is absolute environmental catastrophe, I think. It's horrible. War is horrible. It's absolutely horrible. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. And really appreciate your support. And please do check out the second video of the 10 Days in Ukraine series. I am not an expert, right? It is just me stitching together stuff and trying to make it look all right. So, you know, take it with a degree of be a little kinder than you would to like a BBC documentary maker or whatever. But it is there for you. Thanks so much, as I say, to the members who so kindly put their comments on it that will never see the light of day outside of the members. So I really appreciate that, because I've had to change the video and re-upload it just because it had that one digit that was wrong. Anyway, thanks guys. Take care. Speak soon.